morning, good afternoon, good evening. I know we've got an international list of people signing up. So from wherever you're coming from, welcome to VMware Carbon Black office hours, indicators of compromise. So this session, it was born out of a blog that I wrote some time ago. And I was looking at, rather than your traditional indicators of compromise, your hashes, your registry keys, domains, whether we could look at behaviors, so behaviors of threats, behaviors of malware, to search across our estate and try and get ahead of the attackers was the idea. So my name is Richard Mason. I'm a senior consultant working with the WWPS in VMware. I've been here nearly 2 years. I've worked in IT security for 20 years. As a PS engineer, I see it as my job to help you guys get the best out of your investment. So we're talking about setup, configuration, fine tuning, training, best practice guidance. And I'm hoping we can bring some of that today. We're not trying to sell you futures. A couple of interesting facts about myself. I used to be a farmer, up at 4:30 every day, feeding cows, driving combines, tractors, outside every single day of the year. And the last 2 years with VMware, nearly 2 years, I've actually, these four walls, I've not met a single of my 36,000 colleagues physically, and I've not been on a customer site. So quite a change in circumstance, but good. So let's move on. So the agenda today, pretty simple. I've got a few slides I'm going to talk to. We're going to throw in a few poll questions. So please take the time just to answer those, just a single click. So the first one's already there. So when I say, do you proactively threat hunt? I'm looking at people saying, every week I put time aside. So let's just give that a few seconds. How many have we got here? So I'm going to let that another 10 seconds. So interesting, we've actually got nearly double people saying no to yes, and a few not sures. I'm just trying to gauge where people are at, and hopefully I'm hoping this session is going to inspire a few people to go out there and put into practice some of the things we're going to talk about. So I'm just gonna, I think I need to stop that poll. I think I do that. So yeah, the agenda, a few slides. I've put together the slides based, there's lots of links in there, so you're going to have follow-ups. You'll get this slide deck afterwards. I'll save that question coming through, and you can revisit them. So there's some best getting started resources, best practices, things you can sign up for, and yeah, and at the end of that, the main event. So we're all here today. There's more than half the time assigned to Q&A. So hopefully you guys are gonna, don't be shy and chime up, and then Hannah's on board to help me wade through the questions. There's a Q&A button. If you could use that for questions, that would be great. So these sessions, office hour sessions, they've been put together for us to present to you guys resources that VMware Carbon Black make available. So we're not actually here today to talk about third-party threat intelligence. I would, however, encourage you all, if your interest is piqued, you want to take it further, go out there, get your favorite search engine, search for open threat intelligence. There's actually, there's a wealth of information out there. Join some forums. One of the key foundation blocks of threat hunting is actually keeping on top of what's happening, what are the current threats, what's new. And we've got a TAO team, so this threat analysis unit, based all around the globe. I think there's America, New Zealand, Europe, and they're constantly pulling malware apart, pulling threats apart, and then producing these reports, threat intelligence notifications. So the best way to get these, if you log on to the Carbon Black console on your dashboard, and I would encourage all of you, if you haven't done this, you've got a widget getting started. I'm sure you've all got started. Bin that off, move your threat analysis report widget to the top. So this gets updated weekly, more than once weekly, depending on the threats out there. And I'm really, really encouraging you to go out there and read these. It doesn't matter what product you've got, whether it's on premise, in the cloud, there'll be a section that tells you, how do I search for, has this affected me already? There'll be a section on what protections I can put in place to prevent it. If you've got endpoint standard, there may be rules you can add behind behavior to stop this particular file doing something. I'm also going to encourage you to kind of read almost between the lines and understand, what is this threat actually doing? And I'm just going to, just as an example, I'm going to use Kaseya. It's sort of top of mind. There's two things that this did. First of all, they renamed the Windows binary certutil.exe to cert.exe. And I think the idea there was they were trying to hide their tracks from products like Carbon Black EDR. Unfortunately, we also have a report that looks for if the original file name was certutil, but the file now is no longer certutil, then that is actually an indication. They also used that new cert.exe to pull down a string of hexadecimal. So there was no download of a malicious file. It was hexadecimal, certutil encoded it into agent.exe. This file was actually signed by a revoked certificate, which just kind of, I can't believe how much damage it did, given it's so sloppy and badly, you wouldn't buy software this bad. And this link here, if you don't log on the dashboard daily or even weekly, you can subscribe to those into your inbox, those reports. So every engagement we have, the first thing people ask with EDR is, when's the first threat hunting session? When are we doing advanced threat hunting? It's like, grab your pitchfork. I've got some bad news. It's not really like that in real life. If there was a magic button or a string that I could give you to find bad guys, it would already be in the product. There's actually what we do give you though. So there's at least a dozen watch lists, and I'm guessing I should have counted them. There's probably 100, nearly 1,000 reports in there, all of them individual threat hunts. And by enabling them, following this link, so tuning recommendations, which ones should we alert on? We're threat hunting 24 hours a day, every 10 minutes. Has this happened in my environment? And then following that on the tuning is actually really good practice. It's teaching you guys, how do I take a threat report and make it more advanced in my environment? I've checked this. I would have got an alert if I'd turned it on. Last week, I spoke to the admin. He was patching Microsoft Office. So I know that's a false positive. Is there a command line that I could add? Was it a particular username that needs adding? So I'm practicing my search syntax. I'm also starting to understand what's normal. And this is the biggest tool in your armory, is understanding your own environment. The minute you see something abnormal, if you understand normal, it's just going to beacon out to you. You have to go through it. You've got to do this every week, twice a week, 2 hours a week, whatever you can afford to do. Spend time threat hunting, understanding your own environment. These reports, again, our TAO team, even though some of them come from the community, so people submit them to us, they will be checked by the threat analysis unit. Are they valid? Do they need tweaking? And again, you can subscribe to this link and it's going to keep you on top of all that information. As I said earlier, it's all about the current threats. There's new reports coming in. Some will get binned out as software expires. We haven't seen a threat for 5 years. It's not relevant. It's all about keeping on top of the information. I've mentioned EDR quite a lot there. I'm sure a lot of you haven't got EDR and you've only got endpoint standard, for example. Can you threat hunt with endpoint standard? Yes, you definitely can. This is probably one of the better links I'm aware of. So Kirk Hasty is one of our PS guys. He's now an architect, but he still keeps this up to date. It's a blog. I think there's, last count, maybe 60 different use cases, things you can do with endpoint standard, including threat hunting, including investigating your environment, including troubleshooting Windows, troubleshooting network events. I can guarantee if you read this blog and there isn't something that you think, oh, I didn't know I could do that with endpoint standard, I'll be amazed. It's yeah, please read that after this session. And the last one here, please don't anyone think I'm calling them dummies. This is a great resource. It was written by Carbon Black. It's your typical subject for dummies. The book's about this big. It'll take you 2 or 3 hours to read, and it's packed full of background info. Why are we threat hunting? How do I go about building a team around what I need to do? What do I need to give them resource-wise, time-wise? Please take the time. We can't possibly cover it here, but it's really, really good background information. So I think at that point, we've just got a couple of other polls we're just going to throw in. So if Marcel would do the second one. So this is a slightly different take. Okay, so we've perhaps got a third yes, 2/3 not, some that not sure. You may have this and not realize if you've got workloads, which is the vSphere adaptation to Carbon Black, it comes with it. So you might have. So let's just let's jump into poll 3, can we, Marcel, please? And this is the same, audit and remediation stroke live query. So we've got slightly less than have it, use it, and a number that don't. That's fine. That's fine. Okay, thanks, Marcel. So with live query, I was specifically looking at, it's basically OS query under the hood. So we've got an SQL language and we can go to every endpoint as opposed to the other parts of the cloud which send information to the cloud. We can go to every endpoint and say, tell me some information about the operating system or files on it or registry on it. In terms of threatening, so there's some simple artifacts that we can query. It may be you've had an incident, you've done an investigation, you found artifacts related to an event. It might be a hash, it might be registry keys. Well, I can go, actually, I need to know across my estate, has that happened anywhere else? As part of the kill chain, attackers will try and get in somewhere. It won't always work. They might get 2/3 of the way through. Command and control doesn't work. They'll go away, they'll hone their techniques and they'll try again. So has this happened anywhere else? And it's a simple query. Tell me every endpoint if you've got a file with this hash. That's a really simple use case. What time is it? Silly question. There's a great blog out there from Rick McElroy. He's one of our senior security guys. He's talking about adversaries tampering with timestamps. And the idea being, you can imagine you're doing an investigation. The intruder came in here. He might have moved laterally. He escalated privileges. He created a scheduled task. He exfiltrated data. Well, the attacker's thinking, well, if I can move my timestamps over here and you're looking here, actually, I'm becoming invisible to you. And increasingly, we're seeing this happening in environments. But it gets me thinking, so, well, actually, if somebody's changing time, is that not an indicator of compromise potentially? So as part of that threat hunting that we're all going to do when we leave here, I would suggest 1 week you say, okay, this week, in my 2 sessions, I'm going to investigate time in my environment. How often does time shift? I can guarantee if you've got NTP, it's constantly shifting by microseconds. But an attacker's not going to shift by a little bit. He wants to shift by maybe 3 days. So he's outside of that window that you're looking. How is time controlled? Have I got NTP servers? Does it use domain controllers? Actually go onto endpoints and change time. What logs do you get in Carbon Black? If somebody runs date on a Linux machine with a date stamp and time after it, is that normal? If it's not, then that's something we can look for. Behaviors rather than actual traditional indicators. I mentioned it earlier, Kaseya, a revoked certificate doing all that damage. So now we've got a table we can query. Tell me every file in C Windows System 32 on all my endpoints, Windows, that isn't signed. There might be a few, but then that's building up that picture of, well, what's normal? Tell me every file that's signed by Amazon, Microsoft, Symantec, or GoDaddy, but isn't trusted, so potentially revoked. Do the same in C users. Well, how often am I seeing unsigned software? Take it another step. I've got PowerShell scripts running as scheduled tasks all over the place. Why aren't they signed? It's easy to sign a script. And then we can build that into endpoint standard and start saying, well, these files have now got reputation because I've signed them. Yeah, it's all the power of Yara. So anyone who's done investigation, incident response will know how powerful Yara is. It gives us the ability to search, not just for a file, but for patterns within files. So imagine I've got a Mimikatz and I've changed the name and I've changed the header and footers. So it's a different hash. It's not going to be matched by a traditional hash matching antivirus. It's still Mimikatz though, because of what it can do. Well, Yara, we can write rules and say, if there's this pattern and this pattern and this pattern, or 2 of these 3 patterns, then that's Mimikatz. I don't care what it's called or what it looks like. It's Mimikatz. And what I was encouraging earlier about reading the reports is look at ways to use behavior as another way of creating Yara rules. So a tool like PE Studio and a hexadecimal editor, we can look at a file and say, okay, this file can erase the Windows event logs. Well, there's a pattern in there. The executable will call a DLL likely. So now I can write a rule and say, well, tell me every file in C Windows System 32 that can delete event logs. So that there will be some, definitely, but they'll make sense. There's a debug executable, there's a debug helper DLL. Well, it makes sense. You're debugging, you clear the event logs, you debug again. But is that normal in C users? If somebody's got software that can clear or C program files? What about ransomware? It can change your wallpaper. Again, there's a pattern to that. Why would anyone have software in C users that can change wallpaper? We're talking about putting that ransom note up. Escalation of privileges. I can tell you now, again, there's a pattern. C Windows System 32 run as.exe. Absolutely, it makes complete sense. But again, C users, should it be there? Enumerating across a domain for user information. Not normal behavior. Some of you may be saying, hang on a minute, attackers can obfuscate their code. So, it's not, even that has a pattern. Well, tell me all the systems that have got obfuscated code. Again, building that picture of normal. And of course, I just mentioned event logs. There's a reason users want to clear them. It's because they're an absolute minefield of information. Even the act of clearing them leaves a trail. So you can search, tell me every time the Windows event log was cleared by looking for this ID. Tell me when a user failed to log on or did log on to a server. Why is that user even trying to log on there? Time changing, that'll be in Windows event logs. don't just think of system, info, and security. There's about 100 Windows event logs. If you turn on DNS logging, you can go back weeks or months. Tell me every endpoint that ever queried for baddomain.com. Okay, so I didn't think that machine was infected, but why was it querying for that particular domain name? Somewhere I need to investigate, and you start pulling that thread and following the clues. And I'm aware of the time. So my last point here, it really is, I can't stress it enough. It's a sporting adage. The more I practice, the luckier I get. It's the same with threat hunting. The more you spend doing it, the more you understand normal, the more chances you've got of spotting abnormal. I'll just quickly run over these. There's a few resources here. If you're interested in live query, there is a whole, it's probably one of the most active communities we've got. People present queries. I've thought of this idea. We've got staff that will verify them and say, yeah, that's a good query, and it won't kill your server with performance. So go and visit that. If you haven't been to TechZone yet, the Carbon Black part of TechZone is pretty new. It's brilliant. It's growing every single day. There's product paths. If you've got endpoint standard, there's a path to follow to make the most of your investment. How do I strengthen my policies? How do I create reputation from unknown files? Step by step by step. I mentioned the blog, so I'm sort of self-promoting here. This is one that I wrote. The bits with the Yara, the PE Studio, there's screenshots, there's example Yara rules. I hope, having read that, it'll all make a lot more sense. And then we've got two links there off to test drive. If you want to go and play and see what malware looks when it's exploded in an environment, you don't have to do it in your own environment. You can go and play with our labs and see what logs look like, see what patterns of activity we get. So I mentioned there's a couple of slides I was going to talk to. We have, I believe, 2 or 3 poll questions coming up. Just getting your feedback. I'm hoping any questions that you want to ask, if you could put them in the Q&A. I think Hannah mentioned if you can put any requests for future sessions in the chat, that would be awesome. So I'm going to just pause and have a quick drink and let the polls pop up. So I think that was the last question. We've got one question, a couple of comments. So I'm new to CB, but what is Yara? Is it a tool available to CB standard users? So it's not in endpoint standard. It's actually part of OS query, which is part of the live query. This is not to say it won't be in the future, because the vulnerability scanning, it uses OS query to pull back the information for what's installed. So I think watch this space, and I'm hoping it may be built. You can actually, if you visit the developer forum, there is it's a containerized Yara scanner that you can plug into your cloud environment, and it will pull binaries out, scan them, and send the results back to create a watch list. So that might be interesting. There was a couple of comments about, could we have sessions on tuning rules, approving files? I definitely think we could, 100%. I think that would be popular. I would suggest go and have a look at the tech zone as well, because there's sections, and this is, I'm talking certainly within the last month, this is quite new. And there's some really good articles, quite in depth and about tuning and approving, different types of approvals and reputations. I'm new to threat hunting. Is there a blog that tells you how to get started? There almost certainly is. And I'm going to have to ask Hannah if there's a way we can get your details, and I'll dig it out and send it on, or I will speak to Hannah and I'll add it to the slide deck. But yeah, for sure, there will be an article, maybe on the community, maybe as a blog, and if there isn't, then I will write one. Is CB Protect going to be combined with CB Defense? So I don't actually do CB Protect app control. Sorry, I can't answer that question. I don't know. I can, if there's a way of taking that offline, and I can probably come back to you and find out. Is OS query something that can be used with endpoint standard? I think I kind of covered that before. I think if you were to look under the hood, you would find OS query is it's a simple executable. You'd need to disable the policy to run it, but you need the console in the cloud to say, run it across all endpoints. Again, I'm not saying it won't be there soon or in the future, but Carbon Black vulnerability management was recently added to CBD Carbon Black Defense. Is there going to be any webinars or training offered on this new component? As a professional service engagement, we definitely provide sessions on it. Now, clearly, you have to buy professional service. I think that potentially could go as a request for a new session. Check the tech zone as well. If there isn't, I will talk to the guys that manage it, and I will get them to make sure there is something. I'd be surprised if there wasn't something, if not there, imminently going to be there. Is there a way to load a file to an on-prem sandbox from CB Cloud? Yes. So the developer network, as I mentioned, there's a Yara, it's a containerized Yara scanner. It's all API driven, so you kind of need the SDK to make the API calls to pull the files. You also need to be sharing the binaries with the cloud, because if they're not there, they can't be pulled down. But yes, there's not a, I can't probably answer it completely today, but is it possible? Yes. Yeah, I think hearing about automations using the API, I think that would be a popular session. Hannah, are you saying I should give my email address? I'm not sure. I'm sure we can sort that out. I think it's maybe, well, how would I do that, Hannah? Put it in the chat. Everyone, I don't mind giving my email out. It's not private property. That said, my day job is talking to customers. So if I get 300 emails, I may not get back to them all. No more questions in the Q&A at the moment. I see Hannah says there was a session on vulnerability management. So yeah, absolutely, we'll be sending the resources out. I think there'll be a slight delay while the recording processes, but within the day you should have them. Can I add my own threat feeds to enterprise EDR? Yes, I'll break it down actually. Can you add them? Yes. Can you do it easily? It's not a click in the console, so you would have to use the API. But 100%, if you're interested, check out the developer network, and you want to look for the API for threat feeds as opposed to watch lists. So you want to create a threat feed that you can then display. But yes, you can do that. I don't have EDR or live query. Can I still threat hunt? Yeah, 100%. To be fair, I don't think you need any software to do it. A lot of it is actually just sniffing around. But you endpoint standard, I put the link on the first, I think it was on the first slide. That's the first place I would go to. The Kung Fu blog. I'm sure you remember that Kung Fu blog. It's yeah, there's some really awesome examples. And actually with endpoint standard, you get some additional benefits. For example, all the country codes, all the IPs are actually broken down into city and country, which I don't think they do in EDR. So you can say I'm particularly interested in traffic from any city in the Ukraine. I'm just working. Suddenly we've got the questions coming in. Oh, I've got too many places at once. Is there a chance in a future release when you run an OS query that something will be listed instead of being blank when there are no findings? I can ask the people to deal with it. As I say, with PS, I'm sort of dealing with what can the product do today. But yeah, I've got access to the guys that would know better, so I can certainly ask that question. What trends in protection are threat actors picking up on and trying to circumvent? How does the product evolve to handle the increased occurrence in those? So I think the way I'm going to answer that, I was once, I mean, this is 100 years ago when I was still at school. I remember an argument and somebody said, it's a lot easier to knock a wall down than it is to build one. And it kind of stuck with me. I think in protection, building software to protect guys is a lot harder than reverse engineering what you've done and actually knocking it down. So of course, I wouldn't be surprised if attackers actually buy our software and log support tickets to help understand how to get around it. In terms of how we're developing, there's fairly new, so we've built in AMSI protection. So there's a dynamic list of rules in the background looking for particular specific threats. And this is obviously plugging into Microsoft and AMSI, but these are being written and pushed out automatically to you guys. So that is an evolution. And as new, the touting team recognize, and they can be quite specific. There's not many false positives, and they're looking for, if you've got Kali Linux and Metasploit, Meterpreter, whatever it's called, there's going to be specific patterns relating to that, and that is exactly what we're picking up on. And obviously, one of the great things about the cloud is I forget the number. It seems to go up every time I say it. We're getting like 1 trillion events a day. Just the sheer enormity of that data lake of information and being able to process it. Machine learning, working out what is good. That's always been the hardest place to get to. This is defined as good. Everything outside is bad. That's the sort of app control way. It's getting better. There's more information to work with. Every customer has a different environment, but yeah, the sheer volume is helping. I'm trying to read that question. Can you recommend any good third-party sources of intelligence? I suppose today was supposed to be about CB resource. There is, I tell you what, there's one that cropped up the other day. It is called tweetioc.com. So somebody's actually gone through and they actually process all the tweets on threats and put those into IOCs. So it's, you know, it's particularly current. I'm sure it's tweetioc.com. Another one, Alien Vault. So we use an Alien Vault feed in EDR, particularly just around IPs. They have other feeds, so you could have a look at that potentially. I think they do playlists or something. But anything that's current, and if there's an active community, I would encourage those are the kind of ones that you want to be involved with. Somebody's saying, if I only have a list of usernames, can that be translated to device ID or machine name? And is there a way to then put those into specific policies in a query? I suspect with a script and an API call, we could find a way. It depends on the length of the list. For sure, you could search for users and then reverse engineer the device ID. It would be a manual task. And if the device IDs don't match a particular pattern or they're not in a particular part of the domain, then you can't easily use the sensor grouping to put them into policies. But for sure, I'm pretty sure a PowerShell script, or if you're familiar with Python SDK, it could be done. Any more questions? Hannah's suggesting we'll give it a minute. So we're going to actually, once we do finish, we're going to leave the bridge open for 5 or 10 minutes. So if there are any follow-ups, any recommendations people want to put in, please do. And we've got a team ready to come back to you guys. Okay, I think we'll, the questions have dried up. So hopefully we've answered everything people need. I'm going to stick around for 5 minutes. So if there are questions you want to ask, just put them in the chat, and I think we'll leave it open for 5 minutes. But yeah, thank you for attending. I hope it's been of use. Thank you for answering the polls, and yeah, look forward to catching up with you all at a future occasion.